Welcome to the Careers by Jen podcast, episode 182. Today on the podcast, Jen interviews Stephen Warley on the subject of why independent work will become the norm of the future. I don't know. I'm not saying he's wrong, but I don't like it. A regular walking into a bar and everyone calling out in unison independent work just doesn't have the same vibe.
You're listening to the Careers by Jen podcast with me, Jen Swanson, the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. What would you do if suddenly tomorrow you learned that your current job was ending for whatever reason and you couldn't continue to do what it is that you've been doing? What would you do? What could you do? Some of us, many of us, have had to face that. I've been downsized and I know I'm not alone. It was hard, it was scary, and ultimately it was a fantastic opportunity, even though it took me quite a while to view it that way. What if you are not being downsized or let go, but you're bored? What if you just don't like what you're doing anymore? What if the color has gone out of the picture and you can't figure out how you are going to keep doing this joyless thing for the next however many years you have before you can retire? Have you ever considered working for yourself? Well, today's guest, Stephen Warley, is from lifeskillsthatmatter.com, and he believes that self-management is the way of the future. I'm going to start off by asking him what has shifted. What has shifted in the world to make this the case? And why you might seriously want to consider working for yourself. We'll get to my conversation with Stephen Warley right after this.
Are you procrastinating? Do you want to start a job search but aren't quite sure where to begin? Is it all just a little overwhelming? At Careers by Jen, we have a 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge to help you get unstuck and move toward finding your dream job. Every day for 5 days, you'll receive an email to your inbox that asks you to complete one task. Every task you complete moves you closer toward your goal. The best part about this challenge is that it's absolutely free. Come over to careersbyjen.com and you'll see the 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge on the right-hand side of the screen. Click on the image of Jen, sign up with your email address, and you'll be 5 days closer to reaching your goal. Why wait when you can get busy? Visit careersbyjen.com after this podcast.
So, Stephen Warley, welcome to Careers by Jen. What is it that has shifted to make independent work the new norm?
You know, I feel like it's something that I almost feel like I'm this living example of what's happening to work, because I feel like at every stage of how work has been changing, I've been affected by that. I was laid off election day 2000, but I think where independent work, as we're starting to know it and appreciate it in modern society, it really had its birth during the age of the internet. You know, we started to become a little bit more open to this as there were those first few people, you know, starting to create their own work via the internet in the late 1990s. And then somebody like me getting laid off in 2000 and not finding work right away, that's how I started becoming more open to creating my own work.
Yeah, it's a struggle for so many. There's so many downsizes and so many shifts in the technology and automation and reasons why people are finding themselves sometimes in midlife, when you figure you'd have a career without a job, and then you're looking around saying, now what?
Just got off the phone with somebody today who had a very high-powered job in radio and in Canada, and was laid off a couple of years ago out of the blue. And it was quite a shock to the system for him. And I think that is very true. I'm on the cusp. I'm 44. And long ago, I know that there was never going to be a company that was going to employ me for 30 years. I also don't expect that I would ever again have full traditional employment for the next 30 years. But for that 45 plus, that 50 plus, you know, that's not what they were taught. That's not what you grew up with. So I think I take a lot of extra care in meeting people where they're at, knowing that their definition of work, or what they thought it was, the expectations they had, was very different, and bringing them across that bridge to show them that there's so many more options, there's so many more opportunities. I think that's the exciting thing right now, that when you are in your midlife and you feel very trapped, there are a lot of different ways out, but you have to be willing to look for them or be willing to explore them.
So some of the people listening I know are just that. They're in careers that they've had for a while. Maybe the spark has gone out of the career. Maybe they're looking to transition into something different. And maybe this sounds very scary, working for yourself.
It does. Again, I also remind people that we had an entire educational system that taught us to be employees, right? Think about it. You were never encouraged to go work for yourself. We all got college degrees, or most of us went to college to get a good paying job. Well, that whole bargain, that whole social contract is changing. It's evolving, and it's continuing to accelerate. And I think that, and I just want to say, let everybody know where I'm coming from. I am not one of those, like, I thought I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur, or that had this natural ability toward it. I call myself a reluctant entrepreneur. I chose it out of economic necessity. And I think there's going to end up being more reluctant entrepreneurs than intentional ones over in the coming decade. And what I see, Jen, is I think we need to start, like anything in our life, our brain, when it's unfamiliar, we immediately say, no, all the fear sirens go off in our brain. And what I'm trying to do, instead of just diving into like, here's the hard skills of how to start a business, I actually talk to people a lot about the emotional side of things, the processing, the life skills, the soft skills to make you more resilient and valuable, to really understand yourself. Because that is where I think we need to start for the types of businesses and work that I'm advocating people create, that it's in alignment with your values, your needs, and your abilities. So I think the more we can get comfortable with that, all of a sudden it becomes a lot less scary, because yeah, this is not like getting another job. This is a whole new form of work, but there's also a lot of upside. You get so much more control over your time, your energy, your money, who you get to work with, what you get to work on, how you get to work on it than ever before. I mean, you know that.
Yeah, I would call myself a reluctant entrepreneur too, because when I started the podcast in 2011, back when podcasting was still really fairly new, I was doing it off the side of my desk, working 2 jobs, having a great time doing that. And this was just a hobby. It was fun, and it's still fun. But it again, I've had to learn the entrepreneurial skills along the way to get to where I am now.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that we always think about is that a lot of us chose work because we thought that's what we were supposed to do. I can't tell you how many times people say, I ended up in this career path because that's what my parents wanted me to do, or that's what I needed to do to keep my spouse happy, my boyfriend, girlfriend. It's what all my friends were doing at the time. And you kind of get to this point in your life. It usually happens a lot in your midlife. You're like, you know what? I can't tell you how many times people have also told me, Stephen, success took me away from what I originally wanted to do. And I always thought that was so strange, because a lot of times we think we work because we got to make money, we got to pay the bills, but we're also human. That's the survival side of being a human. It's like, obviously, got to pay bills, got to survive, help support your family. But the other side of it is you're human, and you have tendencies and desires and preferences about what it is that you want to do in life. And for some reason, we had an economic system in the 20th century that suppressed that in us, that we were supposed to just align and submit to what companies and corporations wanted from us. But now we're moving into this age where there's never been a better time to be yourself. You can actually get paid to be you. And by the time you've reached your midlife, you have so much more to work with, so many more stories and experiences than you might have imagined, that you can repackage and turn into really creative ways. There's so many cool problems out there that you unknowingly could be solving.
And I guess for somebody who's tentative about this whole thing and who is looking to transition, if they're still in a position that they've been in for a while and there is no imminent need to move, they could test this out by doing it off the side of their desk, could they not?
Absolutely. I mean, you have car insurance, you have life insurance, you have health insurance, you have home insurance. I want you to have career insurance. And it's a little different. Career insurance means that it's like, okay, I've heard enough about this now in my social circles. I've heard it on the media. Work is changing. I want to start getting ready for that. You don't have to do this all at once. Even if you carve out a half an hour a week just to have some self-reflection time with yourself to say, hey, what do I really want to do? Or like, if I got laid off tomorrow, what would I do? What's the plan? That's what I want people at the very least is, what is your plan if you got laid off tomorrow? And to be a little bit more intentional, what's the thing that you really want to do? Because it does take time. I know it's very sexily online today that there's a lot of people out there saying how you can like be a millionaire in 3 months. It's not true.
Right.
From
No,
my
it's not.
experience on average, it takes about 2 years. It actually took me 5 years. So that's why I think the sooner you get going on this is better. That's what I want. I want this to be made on your terms. Don't have this decision made for you. Don't get caught flat-footed and get laid off one day. You lose all of your income at once, everything, potentially your identity if you've been doing this for quite a while. I want you to be thinking about this right now.
What kinds of independent work would somebody who's thinking about transitioning be able to move into that would allow for that learning curve, that growth, along the way?
Generally speaking, you want to look a lot. It's to be surprising. A lot of us are now working some sort of knowledge work, and a lot of those really lend themselves to allow you to be a consultant or a freelancer. So there's 4 parts. When you're going to work for yourself for the first time, you've been, working as an employee most of your career. When you're going to work for yourself for the first time, there's actually 4 things that you're doing to yourself, changing it at the same time. You're learning how to manage yourself. You are validating a business idea. You're setting up the business, and you're looking for customers. It's really hard to do all that at once, especially if you've never had a lot of experience doing it. So that's why I always recommend people, let's look at that. Instead of validating and going out and finding a business idea, kind of take an inventory of all of your skills. What are you really marketable at doing? What will people pay for you right now? And I can't tell you how many times, Jen, where people say, well, I was doing this as an employee, and within a couple of years, I was making the same amount of money as a freelancer. And even by year 3 and 4, they're making double or more. And at the same time, they're doing it in less time. They're getting to work with clients and on projects that they want to work on. They're not just stuck with whatever they have to do because they're inside this one company. So I think if you can do that inventory. And if you're like, oh, gosh, I have no idea what my most marketable skills are, I want you to think of 5 people in your life who have seen you work, whether it's professionally or personally, that you really trust, that they're going to give you some honest answers. And I want you to ask them, if you had to recommend me for one thing, what would it be and who would it be for? So that way you start to have an understanding of how other people see you, and then who is the person that you could best serve? Because a lot of times we're in our own heads, but people see us in a different way. They're a better observer of all of our habits and behaviors than we are.
I was just telling a group of people I was facilitating a class for yesterday. I was telling them that very thing. I was saying, we don't always see ourselves in the same light, and so get some perspective and gather people you trust around you to give you that perspective. It's so true.
Yeah, and it's also, or just start bringing more awareness to like, what do people always ask me for? And a lot of times it might be something that you think is so easy that you can't even imagine somebody else would have a problem doing it. That's the thing. A lot of times we like to overthink this. We also believe that work has to be miserable to be considered work. Not true. It can be very enjoyable, as it is for you, Jen, and me. And not saying that we don't have tough times and bad days. Of course we do. But it's this idea of, what are you already doing that you naturally enjoy, that you could see yourself doing over and over again? And just going out to the world and start talking about that. When I also tell people, when you are in this state of mind, when you're telling your story, when somebody asks you, what do you do? Most often we default to that. I'm going to tell people what I think I'm supposed to tell them, what I'm doing in my current job, even though that's not what I really want to do, or not what I'm thinking about. I want you to start leading with, where are you going to the future? Because you're not letting people know about what it is that you might want to do, or you're like, I kind of have this crazy idea. It's something I've always been thinking about. Well, that person might know somebody to refer to you to, or to talk about, or they might have another idea for you, so you're denying them the opportunity to help you in terms of the work that you really want to do.
Do you think people over-identify with the roles that they've held?
Absolutely. Totally. I worked at CBS News Sunday Morning. And I was in the late 90s, I was in my early 20s. And I remember they had layoffs. And I remember the director of Sunday Morning, who had been there for like 30 years, got laid off, didn't see it coming. And I saw him 6 months later, and he was basically like clinically depressed. I mean, because his whole identity was wrapped around this position, this company. And I remember being in my early 20s saying to myself, I never want to end up like that. I never want to have my identity tied to a business or even a title. I want to have my identity just intrinsically aligned with who I am. And your identity is your values, it's the motivations, it's your tendencies. And that's how I chose early on. I saw that company where I'm trying to inspire people now to do that. So that way you will be more resilient and more valuable, regardless of the company that you're going to be working with or for, or regardless of the title that you're going to hold.
Yeah, I find sometimes when people find themselves suddenly out of work in mid-career, midlife, that there's a lot of grief wrapped up around that.
I'm so glad you're reading my mind because I think this is not discussed enough that when you go through a major, if you're getting laid off at 45, 50, 55 or later, I think we need to give permission to people to mourn, to say, whoa, there's a big major loss that happened in your life, and we should grieve it as if somebody might even died. And I'm not being extreme in that, because this is an identity that you've always thought about yourself, and now you have to reinvent yourself. You're kind of be born again. It's not like you're always going to throw everything out for the past. I'm always a huge advocate of building on everything that you have accumulated in terms of skills and experience and connections and knowledge. But at the same time, you do have to give yourself a little space to be like, I need reflection. I need a moment in life to kind of figure out where I want to go, because I've been going at this for so long that I kind of need to rediscover myself again.
And some people get the luxury of having time to do that, and others feel the pressure of filling the gap, of filling the void fast, because you've built up a life with things that you're responsible for, and mortgages and vehicle payments and all the rest of it.
2 ideas for that. I have a calculator. Can I do a shameless plug?
Absolutely.
It's a free calculator. You can go to lifeskillsthatmatter.com/calculator. So, Jen, I bet if I asked you or any of your listeners how much money you made last year, most of you could tell me. Mm-hmm. Now, if I asked you how much money did you spend last year, almost nobody could tell me, because we are so detached from how we spend our money, because it's really that steady paycheck that kind of acts as our default budget. But when you start working for yourself, you're creating your own work, you become acutely aware of the money that's coming in and how you spend it. Have you seen a shift in how you look at money since you've been working for yourself full time now?
I have, because of the tax implications and what you have to hold back to then pay the income tax people at the end of the year. I do have to say that my partner has a tremendously detailed budgeting program. So we can tell you how much we've spent on laundry soap in a year because of that.
You're lucky, because that is not typical.
I know it's not.
But lucky, because what you want to, where I'm going with this, a lot of times when we're in that, we're like, we're going to lose our job, we lost our job, we have this lifestyle. Well, it's kind of blown up because every time we got a promotion or raise, as our income went up, so did our spending. And then I'm not going to lie to you, when you're going to make the kind of transition that I'm trying to get people ready for, there could be that temporary setback, that financial setback. So you really want to get a sense of like, how am I spending my money? Because guaranteed, when you stop and have that reflection exercise, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm spending this much money a year on X or Y. So it gives you that opportunity to start making some very intentional cuts to your budgets of stuff that really is not that meaningful to you in the first place. You can do a little downsizing. We all can. So that's step one. Step two, I know this is hard because a lot of times our ego feels very bruised when we've lost our job. But in the short term, you want to figure out, because I always tell people, when you're trying to start a business and then you're not feeling financially stable, that's very challenging. I often recommend that you want to kind of get a hold on your financial stability first. What could you be doing, even if it's some sort of kind of trading your minutes for dollars, gig economy kind of work. And remember, when I say the gig economy, there's a whole pantheon of jobs. I think a lot of times people think it's just being an Uber driver or something on TaskRabbit. It's a low wage opportunity. That's an option, but there are many other things that you could be doing. And I think once you understand how much money you really need to be bringing into your household, that will also help you understand, like, what could I do to like make sure we're breaking even and in the least amount of time, so I have more time to develop the business that I really want to develop for the long term.
Yeah, that's good. That there are ways that you can get creative around that kind of stuff, I think, and figure things out. I was on a business trip doing workshops in up north and in the province, and I was driving with the HR manager of a bunch of sawmills, and he happened to have been an accountant in his former life before he went into HR, and he was talking about using what you already have, and
totally.
in that sense, he was talking about having a house that was fairly big, and that part of the house was only being used to store stuff, and so he and his wife put in a basement suite. Well, I was so inspired that I came home and told my partner about this. And in the next few weeks, we're starting construction on a basement suite.
Congratulations!
Because it's just holding, a foosball table and a drum kit and a bunch of books and stuff. Like how better can we utilize what we already have to bring in some income and lessen the load a little bit? And so I wonder, what people already have, even as far as skill set goes, how can they maximize on that to find something that they can do?
Absolutely. And again, it's back to that skill inventory. I often tell people, a lot of times people think of just their professional skills, but also think of your personal skills or your hobby skills. All of a sudden there could be something there. Or another fun way is, how can you take two of your skills and mash them together? What does that say? What is there a potential opportunity there for? Because another way to look at this is we're moving out of this economy, this mass market economy, where we all had to fit in terms of like, we're all kind of doing similar type of work, working the same way. We all have to keep up with the Joneses. Now that's all breaking up into infinite niches. So again, it's what is your unique mix, how you're doing it, how you look on it. You and I are both helping people try to find work that they love. We're just doing it in slightly different ways. And we also respond to different types of people. And so that way that's why I'm excited and optimistic that I do believe there's plenty of work to go around, because we are going to we're craving that human connection again. I think that's where the economy is going to go back to, as automation kind of eats up a lot of that routine work. But it's really about like, what is that creative human curiosity, that imaginative work that only you can do. And I'm not saying that you have to necessarily run your own business, but sometimes it can be doing something for somebody else. It's not about, like in my old business, I had 4 independent contractors, but I wasn't always telling them what to do or having to solve the problems. I was expecting them to do that, and I think that's what traditional employment beats out of us, is that natural curiosity, that ability to solve problems for ourselves, to think for ourselves. And when you're out here back in the world, I often say that traditional employment is like living in the zoo, where there's this illusion of security. Everything's regular. Everything's kind of done for you. The zookeeper brings you your food. But when I was kicked out into the jungle the first few years, it was hard, because I was like, oh my gosh, I was not prepared for this. But now I have those survival skills for the long term. I feel I'm much more able to deal with the changing economy, can adapt much more quickly than I could if I was stuck inside the zoo. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I want to ask you about some of the mistakes to avoid. But before we get to that, I want to go to a commercial. But when we come back, that's what I'm going to ask you about. Do you want someone to listen? Do you need help setting goals for yourself? Do you want someone to keep you accountable for your progress and to ask good questions that will help to move you toward your success? Have you got a resume that you want reviewed or updated? Do you need help deciding what kind of work you'd like to transition into? If any of these sound like you, I've got some coaching spaces open at Careers by Jen, and I would be happy to work with you to achieve your goals. From a single session resume review to multi-session career or life coaching, there are several packages to choose from. Go to careersbyjen.com, click on online programs, and you will see the coaching packages on the courses page. Select your package and let's get started on your future today. If you like what you're hearing in this episode, I'll ask you to share it with someone you know or with your social media networks so that we can help more people who are considering working for themselves after being downsized or maybe just being bored and wanting to do something different. So please share it and let's help more people through the podcast. I'm talking today with Stephen Warley from Life Skills That Matter, and I'm going to ask Stephen right now about what are some of the most common mistakes people make when they're trying to begin to work independently.
They don't talk to enough people.
Ha.
Didn't take me long to think of that one, does it? I always feel like sometimes like that's the only thing I should teach people. It blows my mind. Anytime I work with anybody, I'm like, well, how many people have you talked to last week or reached out to? None. Well, your business is not going to grow. And again, I think one of the benefits of traditional employment, it shields us from a lot of risk in a very artificial way. When we get that job, we kind of like wipe our brow and we're like, phew, okay, I'm safe again. I don't have to network anymore. I don't have to be as aggressive about learning skills. I'm kind of back on the inside. It's safe. Until you get laid off and they kick you back out again. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know anybody. I only know the people that I've been working with. And it turns out the company I was working for wasn't really keeping me up on all my skills. So you have to, and I don't have a set way, Jen, of saying you have to do X in terms of how you're going to network. And by the way, I don't really like the word connections and network. I just call it making friends. Like you should be anybody that generally interests you, you should talk to them or follow up on a conversation with them, because that's how you're going to build a more authentic network of people that are going to challenge you, support you, and that you're really going to bond with. Because humans we evolved to work together. In any big change that you want to make in your life, you got to be around other people doing that change or doing the thing that is you want to do, whether you want to get in shape, break an addiction, or if you want to work for yourself or be more open to it. If you're listening to us right now, and you're like, yeah, I've been thinking about working for myself, but then go make a list of all your social connections, your close ones. So there's, the 20 to 25 people, personal, professional. If they're all employed, you are already putting yourself at a huge disadvantage in trying to starting that business, because you are hanging out all the time with people who only know how to work for somebody else. If you want to work for yourself, you got to start expanding your social circle and being around other people who are working for themselves, because we're just talking different ways. We sometimes, like you and I could talk in such a way, Jen, that we know what it's like being that solopreneur. There's this other understanding in a way that somebody who's been employed for 30 years doesn't necessarily get. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And when I first was moving from hobby to concerted effort in the Careers by Jen, which was Communication Diva until November of 2017 when I rebranded. When I first was making that shift, I went and joined a women in business group that met at some really early hour of the morning, but they met weekly, like 7:30 in the morning on a Wednesday at a certain coffee shop. And I went and jumped into a whole group of people I didn't know in for that very reason, was to connect with people that were doing this in various degrees of success, and it was really helpful.
Absolutely. You just because when you hang around with like-minded people, that they give you other ways to think about things. I mean, you're going to get stuck, or you're going to have a bad day, or you're going to need something that you don't have in terms of finances, a connection or knowledge. And it's that type of a group that can pick you up. And that's what really accelerates you to keep moving forward. And also when you see other people like you who are a few steps ahead, that's so much more motivating than listening to some billionaire, say how they made all their money. It's not relatable, but it's somebody that you haven't met before. They're a few steps ahead. You're like, gosh, if they could do it, and I feel like they're kind of like me, I know I can do it.
Yeah, because there's so many days when it's like, I'm just going to give up. I'm going to just go get a second job because I have a part-time job. Go get a second job doing something else because this is all just too hard.
Well, what I say to myself, because that happens, that's a fear, that's your brain. It's a survival instinct. Your brain, that basal ganglia, one of the oldest parts of your brain at the base of your brain, just wants to make the best use of your limited energy. It's really well intended. That's why we have a fear response. But what I say to myself is, the change that I've experienced the last 17 years is only accelerating. So I can say to myself, oh, I just want to be taken care of like it used to be. Well, I know that that's over. That's going away. So every day that I can lean into the hardship, that's going to make me stronger. That's going to make me more resilient. That's going to make me more valuable. And that is going to be the best use of my energy, because if I went back into the labor force, I'm just kicking the can down the road for what I think is inevitable.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be grim here, because I think it's exciting. I love the people I love working with are like who, I think we always like to work with the original version of ourselves sometimes. I love working with people who thought they could never work for themselves, like myself. And I love being a part of their journey. And I love talking to them 2-3 years later, and they're doing awesome. And I'm like, do you remember when you said you could never do this? And it's so much fun. And it's about the other thing. Another mistake that people make is they don't have a plan. You have to have some sort of plan, because really building a business is really creating a new set of habits. So that first habit is you have to have constantly, in a way that you feel comfortable on wherever you fall on the spectrum of being an introvert or extrovert, how you like to connect with others, online, offline, or a mix. You have to turn that into a regular habit. The other habit you need to start creating is creating work, like experimenting, creating prototypes, really practicing the craft or what it is. Make mistakes, make lots of mistakes, because that's how you really learn. That's real learning. And again, traditional employment doesn't want us to make any mistakes because corporations by their nature are very conservative. They want to make sure that they spend their money just perfectly, but it's not possible. So when you're working for yourself, you really need to be making mistakes. And people are pretty forgiving. I don't know about you, but they are with me because I invite them to be part of my process and part of my journey. So they love that there's a real human behind this, that it's not just some big, wily organization.
Is it less risky now to do this than it was in the past because so many are doing it? It's not weird anymore. It used to be kind of weird.
Well, 17 years ago, let me tell you, it was weird. It was very lonely.
Yeah.
But even back then, I was a pretty decent employee, but I was 5 years in. I was kind of like, man, you know what? There's just got to be another way to work. And that's why I stuck it out. And that's the thing too. If you can commit to that and do those habits over and over, it will work out eventually because you're going to constantly be learning. A lot of times we just immediately think if it's making money or not, that's the only measure for success. It's not true. Those first 2 years, you're going to be meeting so many new people. You're shifting your identity. You're getting to learn about yourself. You're getting to learn about how you really like to work. You're mastering your craft. So there's all these other value opportunities beyond just money, which will eventually come. And I would like to think, is this riskier or not as risky? I think there's a much larger group of us who have open to this. I think there is a chunk of society that realizes finally that this is going in this direction. So I think there is much more support to mitigate that risk than ever before. I personally think it's riskier depending on just one job with one income stream and giving the power to somebody else to decide whether I get to keep that income or not. So in 2008, I started another business. I also had a bunch of clients at the time. I think I had about 50 clients. And, when you're working for yourself back then, everybody's like, oh my God, you must have the worst. This horrible economy. How's it going, Stephen? And I would say never better. I'm like, you can lose your job. And a lot of my friends did lose their job. All of your income gone overnight. Right. Now, can I lose all 50 clients at once? It's possible, but it's not probable. And that's what I also love about working for myself, that I have multiple income streams. So that makes me more, again, it builds my resilience. So that way, when I do lose a little part over here, I can go out and get more. So it's a much more natural way of working.
Is there a particular kind of person that tends to step out and do this?
Somebody who is, it's very basic for me. It's just how open you are to change. If you are closed and don't like change at all, things are going to get super stressful for you over the next 20 years. If you are super open to change, this is going to be a great time for you. So and to the folks who are resistant to change, recognize that that's happening. It is who you are, but there's a way you can start practicing it and building up your muscles to get out into your, look for opportunities to maybe make you a little, to embrace that discomfort. It's kind of to expand your comfort zone. So recognize that it's happening and try to start broadening that, because this is about survival. You are a human being. You have a desire and a will to survive. And the more that you can be meeting new people, learning new skills, embracing change. And I'm not just saying embrace change for the sake of embracing change. Do it on your terms, but be more open to it. If you're going to just stick your head in the ground and say, like, but this is the way I've been working for 30 years. I want everybody to change back to the way it was. I'm sorry. It's just not how history or economics works.
Well, and the world is zooming by so fast. I remember when I first started working at the hospital, way back when, there were carbon copied lab results, and we had to write on lab requisitions for people to have blood work done. And then there were triplicate copies, and you stuck a piece of paper on a peg, and then the whole thing went down to the lab, and then you had to go down there and match things up. I'm thinking about, that was in my lifetime, my working lifetime. And now everything is computerized. Things just go so quickly. Where do you see us in 20 years?
Oh gosh, 20 years. I don't know if I can make securely a 20-year prediction, but it will. I don't think it's going to look much like the life that we live right now. Yeah. And that's kind of a weird statement to make, I know. And people are like, what? I hope I didn't cause any car accidents. But seriously, I think Somebody once asked me in another interview, like, what's the same about this big change in work and what's different? What is the same is we actually have been here before. It was called the Industrial Revolution. That was a massive acceleration, totally fundamentally changed how people worked. Prior to the late 1800s, most Americans, most Canadians worked for themselves, right? They were farmers, they were craftsmen, those types of skills.
That's true.
Then by the 1920s, everybody was shuttled into the cities, into factories, right? So where, the majority of people in the late 1800s were farmers, today, I don't know about Canada, but in the United States, it's less than 1%.
Yeah.
Even manufacturing has gone through that. It's, we used to have a huge manufacturing sector. Now the people employed by that, and that's not going to change, not going to reverse, it has gone down to the single digits in terms of the majority of the population. People don't know that there are more self-employed people like you and me than there are members of unions in the United States. Again, I can't speak for Canada, but most people don't recognize that because we haven't kind of formed yet as this entity to like have a political voice yet because things have been changing so fast. So I think that's going to change. Now, here's where things are different. Back to your question about looking out to 20 years. The pace of change is accelerating so quickly that we've never experienced that before. Let me give you an example. It's something called the half-life of skills. When you learn a skill, like you were talking about some of the different tech skills that you've learned throughout your career, the average lifespan of a skill now across the board, across industries, is about 5 years. Now, there used to be a skill that used to be able to have, even in my parents' generation, that you could have used for 30 years. Humans, on average, takes about 10 to 15 years to adopt a new change. So we can see we're now already in a territory where we're very out of sync. That's why we're having, in my opinion, a lot of the kind of the anxiety that we have around economics and work right now, because there's literally already a group of people in society who say, you know what, I can't keep up anymore. And we have to really think about, like, what are we going to do about that? And start being more aware of it. And so that change is going to just happen so much more quickly. It's almost like saying that if your car could, get, 40 miles to the gallon right now, imagine that having every year after that, to a point like within a decade, we're talking about a car that can get 400 miles to the gallon. That's how fast things are changing in a way that I have a sense where 10 years out, I think we will have a majority workforce who are independent workers. 10 years after that, I can't make a prediction. I just think it's going to be a world that I might not recognize.
It feels in some senses that you have to either get on the train or get left behind.
I do. I think it's a choice in life, or because there's this other part of me. I'm a gardener. My wife and I love growing our food, and you can go in that direction. You can opt out of the society and kind of go way back if you want and be self-sustaining again, but I'm not even sure if that is going to be a possibility. I mean, where I would love to see things go is like, how do we get back to being human and use technology to make it work for us? Because I think right now we're in this very kind of dangerous place where we're just kind of like, we're just trying to keep up with technology. We're trying to act like robots. We're not robots. We're humans. We have our own special role, which I think it means to be creative, to have feelings and emotions. Hopefully robots won't have that for a long time, because I still think that's our advantage. And that's where we have to like tap into that creativity and be who we are.
That's funny. We were gifted with I don't know if it's an Alexa or the Google brand. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we were given one of these things at Christmas. And we sat and looked at the box after the person was gone that had given it to us. And we just looked at each other and said, we can't. It's terrifying.
Well, I have to say it's funny because we don't, as much as like I'm a person who would like to evaluate technology. Technology has to save me time or money and truly make my life better, because like there's just so many things out there now that people, you just got to use this, and it's just like, I tried it, didn't help me. And it's okay to have the confidence to say that. I also have to say I'm in terms of having a listening device in my house. Like, that's the other thing too. Things are happening so fast that we're not giving ourselves enough time to say, should we be doing this?
Right.
Is it ethical? Right. So I think those are very valid brakes to put on in society that we should be asking more of, instead of just, we're just rushing and, for the sake of speed. And I think that is, we need to have a balance. And it's certainly, it's having dramatic effects just environmentally because we keep moving too fast. On the other hand, I do think of like so many times I'm an entrepreneur and I have ideas all the time. Instead of having to like type it out on my phone, or I guess I could just have it on my phone. It would be nice just to throw it out into the room, but I don't know. It's interesting because I'm wondering, I feel like we're just at this moment where this is the moment where humans have merged themselves with machines. I think it's already happened.
I wonder what our kids and grandkids are going to look back and say, I wonder what it was like to live at that time.
Well, sometimes, I mean, like I said, I'm 44, but sometimes when I talk about like having my first record was Michael Jackson Thriller and everything, or I used a headset with a ringer, the rotary dial, I feel like I'm an 80-year-old man, because that's how my grandparents talked about technology. They were in their 70s and 80s when I was a kid. Again, that's how fast things are changing.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how many solopreneurs and entrepreneurs will be out there, and whether, you say it's going to be the new norm, it's becoming the new norm, and it will just be the norm eventually.
Yeah. And again, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this. I know it's a little outside of what you usually talk about with your community, but I just think it's so important. I'm glad you saw that as well, that we do need to get people talking about this. We should be talking about it in our families, with our friends. And I think there's an opportunity to really start thinking about how do we help each other? That's kind of what I want the future of work to be.
Absolutely. So where can people find out more about you and all the things that you're doing, Stephen?
I think a great place to start is to go to lifeskillsthatmatter.com/get started. So if you're thinking about it, even you want to like, all right, I never thought I'd work for myself, but let's see what this guy has. I have a whole bunch of free resources, and a lot of them are around really just getting to know yourself. That's another unconventional way that I teach people about business, that you're the first resource of your business. You really need to understand yourself and take the time to do that. And you're going to make way better decisions the more you know yourself.
So what's your last bit of advice for the listeners at Careers by Jen?
I want everyone to know a lot of this, the world we're moving into is about being creative and being curious. And I know there's a lot of people are saying, I'm just not creative. I'm not curious. You're a human being. I hate to let you know, being human means you are curious. It's part of you. Anytime you have a question that pops into your head, like, why did that person just cut me off? Or like, how come there's a brown spot on this apple? That's being curious. That is just part of being human. So I want you to recognize, at least step one is start recognizing that you have these questions in your head that you kind of want to learn more. Don't judge yourself about the seriousness of the topic, but just start recognizing that you are curious. And the next step is to start cultivating that curiosity and start writing things down, to start looking for patterns in your thinking, looking all the ideas that you have in your head, start looking for those trends. And that's where you can find a really amazing work opportunity for yourself.
Thanks for being on the show today, Stephen. It was great to hear your perspective, and I'm really sure that people are going to enjoy this interaction.
I had a blast. Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Careers by Jen with Jen Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. If every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.